to have with us Senator Greg Ball to give us a legislative update on happenings in Albany, and we welcome Senator Ball. Thank you for being here.
Well, I'll start because I know that the time is extremely brief, and I want to thank you so much for giving me the time to be here. I will say it's been an absolute honor to serve. You're very lucky to have Assemblyman Castelli representing you. You know, even my colleagues in the Senate, the amount that Assemblyman Castelli works the legislation and the issues that he cares about on both sides of the aisle and in both houses is intense. And there are Assembly people who you can work with and who are workhorses, and there are Assembly people who you know, they have pillows in their chair and you think they're taking a nap. You got a workhorse, and you're lucky to have a workhorse. He's a hell of an Assemblyman, so I just want to say that. You know, just I'll try to go from front to back, and I don't want to keep my back to you, but I'll try to pay respect to the audience. You know, I stood up on my desk in the New York State Assembly and made a lot of friends when I stood up and said, this is the nation's most dysfunctional legislature. And I received wide applause from both sides of the aisle and just beautiful, lovely cacophony of voices that said, step down and get the hell out of here. Since that day, and I can tell you that I stand here today as one of the loudest critics that Albany has ever seen. It is amazing what we have accomplished. And I never thought that Washington, D.C. could possibly make Albany look good, but that's exactly what they've been doing. You're talking about a Republican majority in the state Senate working with a Democratic governor, a governor who is entirely capable, who really has put ideology to the side and has talked about a pragmatic path for New York State, where we have diverged. We have not allowed personalities to split that institution in half. We balance the budget. Definitely not a big deal when it comes to your town board, because you've been making the tough choices for a good amount of time. But in the land of Albany, the land that common sense forgot, it's a big deal. That budget was not only balanced, we cut spending by 2%, and once again in Bedford, 2% may not sound like a lot, but in the land of Albany, where you have increases of 8 to 10% a year, compounded annually, it's a really big deal to see a 2% cut, and a 10% cut overall to state spending. Not only that, I was appointed on the governor's SAGE Commission on Spending and Government Efficiency, tasked with cutting state agencies by 20%. And honestly, you know, I know the battle that's going on in DC, but we did all that without backdoor borrowing, so no gimmicks, imagine that, and no new tax increases. So really a sea shift. You know, we had a former governor in Elliott Spitzer, who everybody thought widely acclaimed, very capable man, came in Albany and said everything's going to change on day one. Then went to pass the largest tax increase in state history and largest increase in spending at that time. What this governor has been able to accomplish, and I got to tell you, I don't know how he's been able to keep Shelley Silver in line, whether he has photos that we don't know about or just his magical powers. But this Democratic governor has been able to keep that 800-pound gorilla in line and has a really great working relationship with our Senate Majority Leader. And it's nice to see the adults taken back over in Albany once again. If you remember just a couple short years ago, they were shutting out the lights, refused to stand for a Pledge of Allegiance, would never work together. And one example I'll tell you is the marriage equality vote. Regardless of where you stand on that marriage equality vote, it was our Senate Republican Conference that brought it up for a vote, allowed democracy to happen, and had an up or down vote. You know, it's a new type of Albany. Let's go to property tax cap. Is the property tax cap perfect? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And to the extent that this property tax cap has to be tweaked, ask for your input. We have put together an advisory council specifically on the property tax cap. But there are a couple good things about this. First, we all know that we cannot continue to have compounded increases in the property taxes, specifically the school taxes, that we've seen over time. Seniors, working families, a lot of people my age are living in their parents' basement. It's not because they like must or mold. It's not because they like no windows. It's because they can't afford to purchase a home. Seniors 72, 76, 80 years old are being taxed out of their homes. We all know this. We've heard it 100 times. When you go door to door, you see that atrocity. Somebody who's 76 years old and is saying, you know what, I have to downsize, I have to move out of my community. That's a horrific thing. That senior who built this community, brick by brick, who raised a family here, should be able to age in place. And actually, over time, by aging in place, let's just cut to bare numbers. Every time a senior is forced out of their home, typically a young family moves in. As cute and cuddly as those kids are, $30,000 a head. By keeping seniors in their home over the long term, we're actually saving money. This tax cap, people say, Greg, I don't need a tax cap, I need a tax cut. I get that. But this tax cap over time, 5, 6, 7 years, will bring the entire system in line. Are there issues with it? Absolutely. There's some safety valves that the school districts have that you do not have. There's certain things that we tried to do, one bill in particular that got vetoed, to help the municipalities. To the extent that you want to see more safety valves in this tax cap, you got to let me know. And I know that you can't always come to the office, and we're all very busy, so we're doing conference calls on this. But we will bring your legislation, I'll bring your legislation, and we will make the changes that need to be made. On mandate relief, we did not even do close to what we needed to do. At our conference in the Senate, we introduced about $280 million in unfunded mandate relief. The Democrats in the Assembly brought about $20 or $30. That's a joke, you don't have to laugh, that's fine. But it's pretty damn close to the number, right, Bob? At the end of the day, we got over 130 million dollars in unfunded mandate relief. A school district down here is probably 110, 120 million overall. So that's not a huge number. But let's go back to the property tax cap. The property tax cap is actually forcing the issue of unfunded mandate relief. The Assembly does not, and I'm not talking about your Assemblyman, who's a hell of an Assemblyman, I'm talking about Shelley Silver, does not want to move the issue of unfunded mandate relief, or has not. I never thought that I'd be at parades in our district and have rank and file taxpayers and voters come up to me and say, Greg, you have to do something about unfunded mandate relief. I mean, I just never thought that that would become part of the public discourse. It's a good thing that this issue has been forced. And because we have municipalities and representatives on both sides of the aisle saying, look, Albany, if you're going to cap our taxes, you have to do something about unfunded mandate relief, that means that now this issue is finally moving forward. The commission that was put together, why do politicians put together commissions? So they don't have to make the tough choices, and the commission can. So we've got to keep our eye on that to make sure that the commission does make the tough decisions. But more unfunded mandate relief is on the way. We have over 250 examples from municipalities, school districts that they'd like to see. I ask that you take a look at our list and add to it. MTA. I honestly believe that next year you will see an MTA tax repeal. For those of you who don't know much about the MTA payroll tax, you're paying it about 14,000 times every time, no matter what you do. There are organizations like the Girl Scouts that never paid a tax like this that are paying it. Schools that help children with autism are paying it. Not-for-profits are paying it. Municipalities are paying it. School districts are paying it. Catholic schools are paying it. Municipalities, county, local, everybody's paying it. So you're getting hit with this tax many, many times. This is the deal. The MTA budget is around $11 billion. We're talking about an organization and authority that is wrought with corruption. Jay Wolder accomplished a great deal in his term as the head of the MTA. We've got to make sure that that ball continues to move down the field. He was not very popular with rank and file members for good reason, because he instituted some changes. He said that he brought about 3,000 cuts in the head count. If you really look at the numbers, it's closer to 1,000, but that's a heck of a lot better than we were previously. This MTA tax, and this is what the tough thing about taxes is now $1.5 billion revenue stream to the MTA. If you're going to repeal the MTA payroll tax, which represents cruel and unusual punishment to taxpayers throughout the Hudson Valley and beyond, which is exactly what we need to do, you've got to make up $1.5 billion hole. So I introduced a bill with Senator Zeldin in Long Island for a phased repeal of the MTA payroll tax. It's about $840 million in savings over a number of years. It starts with small businesses. It slowly phases out the taxes north of the city, the MTA payroll tax, but it does it over time. I honestly believe, and I know the governor has committed to this, I know that members of my Congress have committed to this, I believe that we're going to see a final repeal of the MTA payroll tax that will be phased. That'll come sometime next year. On Homeland Security, my greatest honor is to be the chairman of Homeland Security Veterans Affairs. Working with Assemblyman Castelli, we've passed a couple of great pieces of legislation. But I'll tell you what, you probably heard about my hearings. Got a lot of candy and roses and a couple of death threats from these hearings. Nearly 10 years after 9/11, are we where we need to be? We are not. Before Osama bin Laden was killed, before our hearing, we went to the Port Authority bus terminal. We drove under that Port Authority bus terminal with Eyewitness News. There are guard shacks that were constructed at Port Authority bus terminal, the busiest bus terminal in the United States of America, one of the busiest in the world. Drove under it. We could have driven under there with any number of buses, packed with whatever you can imagine. Drove by guard shacks that were absolutely vacant, that were constructed after 9/11. Drove in and out, drove the wrong way, up and down streets. and we exposed that. That security has now been heightened. The reality is that in southern Manhattan, many of you probably spend your days in southern Manhattan. It is a fortress. It has been fortified properly. The fortification that happened in southern Manhattan, in that financial sector, needed to continue throughout Manhattan and in our core soft underbelly. The reality is that we have a federal Department of Homeland Security that has become a cash purveyor of pork. There are states and cities at much less security risk that are taking our dollars. Just this year, congressional Republicans walked into the room with a chainsaw and an axe instead of a scalpel, and they went to cut hundreds of millions of dollars from New York's Homeland Security funding. I worked with the governor, worked with Mayor Bloomberg, God bless Chairman Peter King, who is an absolutely awesome Chairman of Homeland Security and is doing a great job for New York State. We got about $186 million restored, and they stepped back from that cut. A lot of tough work still needs to be done on this, and honestly, out of all the things I do, this keeps me up at night. On Veterans Affairs, before I forget, we're doing a Hudson Valley Hall of Honor. So we're asking for every town board to nominate a special veteran from your community for that honor, who would then go on for the statewide award. We passed a bill this year to, you've all heard about Westboro Baptist Church and the protests that they do outside of the funerals of active duty service members. We passed two bills through my committee in the New York State Senate that have now been signed into law to limit those protests. We secured $500,000 for a statewide veteran cemetery. Absolutely critical, just on that issue, and I go into it just a little bit. There are 99,000 veterans right now in our region who are underserved. Once you get outside the radius of 75 to 100 miles, individuals are much less likely to take advantage of a veterans cemetery because of the driving distance. We only have two federal cemeteries, one in Long Island that I know of, and one in Saratoga. There's a federal cemetery program to build state veteran cemeteries that is absolutely generous and is geared to being so generous to provide the services to this underserved veterans population. We got the bill passed in the Senate. I believe that the governor will sign it. Shelley Silver has held it up. We're working with Assemblyman Castelli and Assemblyman Felix Ortiz, who was the chair of Veterans Affairs. We got to get that absolutely done. Restoration of the funding for the state veterans hospitals. Bob and I were on this until the very day. They were cutting over $1.5 million from Montrose, $10 million from our veterans hospitals. Until the very day that budget passed, that was not a reality, and we got that money placed back in the budget. Reforming Albany. The bill that passed this year, and it incorporated some of the reforms that I call Libel reforms. The changes that were made this year would have been absolutely impossible in years past. Real loopholes have been carved out have been closed. Increased number of transparency, and it shouldn't have taken this long, but only in Albany, maybe Washington. But the very idea that if you have a pension and you're convicted of a felony, that you will not receive that pension. Just common sense, but that was passed this year. A couple things, and it connects to the veterans issue. We did get a women's veterans coordinator in New York State. Also, there's a real issue that came through our hearing that we had on veterans issues, that women that are serving in the military, many times their custody is brought into question when they're deployed. They deploy, they go serve their country, and their spouse takes advantage of that situation, gains custody of that child, and that patriot at that point cannot get their child back. So we're working on that with our federal representatives as well, Kirsten Gillibrand. We also secured $50,000 for My Sister's Place. That was our top member item this year for their shelter. And the money is limited, but we have found access $2. So to the extent that we can help, please let us know. On animal rights, this is my beautiful dog. This is not a rental. I do not just get her for the photos. She's beautiful. She is loyal. She matches everything I wear. She's the love of my life. We had an animal advocacy day with my favorite wild and furry assemblyman, not Bob Castelli, but Jimmy Tedesco. Bob stopped by. We passed a bill to make it a crime to profit from dogfighting, and had an animal advocacy day that was absolutely awesome. And I'm pushing Charlemagne's Law to get rid of puppy mills in New York State. So, and a ton of other bills as well. So I'll open it up, see if there are any questions, but I thank you for your time. And a lot of good stuff, thankfully, has finally happened.